All right, we're back. Sorry about that delay there. I had a minor malfunction. We're ready to roll for our crew level or our skill level. We'll roll for the 1030 low pilot first. That's a 4. That's average. Now we'll roll for the 3 o'clock level. That's a 5. That's an ace. Now, there are markers for both green pilots and ace pilots. And I'll show you those. This is an ace pilot. This is a green pilot. There are no markers for average pilots. I'm just going to go ahead and mark that ace pilot right there. In the game, the ace pilot gets advantages. The green pilot gets disadvantages. The next step is to fire, actually go through the combat of the bomber versus the fighters. And in this, the bomber always goes first. And we'll take another look at the chart book. You're going to see here's the chart for determining fighter combat or your hits on the fighter. And there is a huge list of modifiers here. I would strongly suggest that you go through each of those modifiers every time, at least until you get really comfortable. A lot of these are stretch cases, things that don't come up very often, only come up if certain systems on your plane is damaged and so on. And so it's easy to miss them and forget them if you don't look at each one every time. I'm going to start with the ace pilot over here to the right at 3 o'clock level. I've got 2 gunners ready to go at him, the top turret and the right waist. And I'm just going to very quickly look through my modifiers here. The first one that applies is I get a -1 for defensive fire versus an ace. The next one that applies, and that applies to both of my gunners, so they both get a -1. Come down here a little further, and you'll see that there is a +1 for defensive fire against 3 or 9 o'clocks. Well, this is 3 o'clock, remember, so they each get a +1. That cancels out the ace. There is one additional modifier, and that's this one right here. +1 defensive fire by a functioning power turret. Now, of the 2, the top turret is a functioning power turret. And so, for my fighter combat, the top turret will get a +1 modifier, all of that combined, and the right waist gunner will fire straight up even. So we'll go ahead and roll. We'll roll the top turret first. That's a +1. 9 + 1 is 10. If we look on the chart, that's a hit. So we hit the fighter. Good job, top turret gunner. If you hit the fighter, the next step is to roll on the damage against German fighter chart. And each plane has their own column on this chart. Here's the FW-190, which we're going against now. There are some modifiers down here depending on what might be going on. In our case, none of those modifiers apply. So we just go ahead and roll. We roll a 7. If we look on our FW-190 down to 7, that stands for FCA. FCA stands for Fighter Continues Attack. There is a marker that gets placed on the plane, an FCA marker. We'll go ahead and put that on the plane. It's hard to see, but there's a -1 die roll modifier on that. That's an indication that when that fighter attacks us, he's got a negative modifier to him. Good for us, good for our top turret gunner. We now go back and we'll roll for our right waist gunner. Our right waist gunner has no modifiers. It's a 0. So we go ahead and roll. That's a 5. We look on our chart. 3 through 7 is a miss. So our right waist gunner missed. The next step is to have that German fighter fire against us. I should mention here, when you do damage a plane, there are other optional tables you can roll on for more realistic damage that can also give other penalties to the fighter. I'm not going to roll on those today just for to keep things as brief as possible. We're already going kind of long. So the German fighter gets to fire at us. There are some dice roll modifiers here that do apply. -1 because it's FCA, but +1 because he's an ace. So their modifiers even out. We roll. That's a 4 coming in from 3 o'clock level. You'll see anything less than or equal to 7 is a miss. So that fighter missed. Now, because that fighter missed, that fighter is done for the combat. That fighter does not get another chance. It is possible to have more than one attack round per wave, per fighter. But because the fighter can't miss, however. In this case, the fighter missed. He's done. I'm going to remove our markers for that fighter. Then we do it all over again for our fighter coming in from 1030 low. Now, it's the same exact chart. We go right back to the bomber defensive fire chart. Same exact modifiers available. In this case, the only modifier that applies for either of my guns is the functioning power turret modifier. There's no modifier for a plane coming in at 1030. There's no modifier for an average pilot. And so, it's just that +1 modifier for the ball turret gunner. So the ball turret will be +1. The left waist will be at 0. So we'll do ball turret +1. That's 3 + 1 is 4. We look again, 3 through 7 is a miss. Our ball turret gunner missed. We'll now roll for our left waist gunner. No modifier. He rolls a 6. You'll look here, he also missed. Both of our gunners missed. Now, before I go any further, I forgot something, and I apologize for that. We talked about it earlier, and that's the ammunition area on the chart. You need to mark off one box for each gun that fires. Now, on our first fighter, we had our top turret gunner and our right waist gunner. For this fighter here, we had the ball turret and the left waist. And you need to mark that off after the guns are assigned. Even if the first gun destroys the plane, the second gun or successive guns are thought to have also fired and used up ammunition. Okay, so we're back on track. Both of our guns missed, and now it's time for that fighter to have his chance at us. No modifiers of any kind, no damage, no skill level changes, nothing. So we'll just go ahead and roll. We roll an 8 from 1030 high. You'll see 1030 high, less than or equal to 8, miss. So this fighter also missed. And just like the first fighter, if it misses, it's gone. Had this fighter hit, it would get another chance at attacking us. And if you look in the corner right here, it'll tell you how many potential attacks this fighter gets per round. In this case, an FW-190 would get 2. Well, he has to hit us the first time to get the second time. He didn't hit us, so he's done. And that's the end of the fighter round. Now, had the fighter hit us, there's a whole long list of charts that we might have to look at. He didn't hit us, neither of them did, so that's the end of the round. And that's the end of the zone because no fighters can come in for a second round, and there was only one zone of attack. So, that being the end of the round, the end of the zone, we'll move on to zone number 3. And we kind of start the process over again as we've done it already. I'll mark down zone number 3 on my zone worksheet. I'll check the target book to find our numbers for Lily. And zone 3 is -1/B. -1 is for fighter resistance at /B as we're now over Belgium. So, go back in the book to the zone weather chart, and we start it all over again. Now in the die roll modifiers, the weather in the zone before affects the weather in the zone we're now currently in, zone 3, but haze has no modifier. So we'll just go ahead and roll for our weather. We roll a 9. A 9 happens to be 100% cloud cover. Okay, that has both good and bad things. Our fighter resistance is still good. That's not going to change on this mission because we're not going to leave this group of zones. So we're at 100% cloud cover. That means we do have to roll for the mission recall. We roll. It comes out as 34. No mission recall. The mission continues. So we roll again on the mechanical failure. 44. Nothing in mechanical failure. Next step is to roll for contrails. Contrails roll comes up a 4, no contrails. All right, we are still in formation. We are still above 10,000 feet. So the next step is to roll for fighter resistance level. Now this time I'm going to show you the chart again. Our plus minus number is -1, but we also have 100% cloud cover, so that's -2, so that's -3 total. Good fighter cover is -1, that's -4. So we have a -4 on this dice roll. 2 minus 4 is less than 0. Less than 0, campaign 1. No fighter resistance in zone 3. And if there's no fighter resistance in a zone, that zone's over. You move on to the next zone. Now if you look, you'll see that the zone we're going into is zone 4. That is our target zone. And that comes with some special factors that we'll have to take into account this time. Not least of which is it's where the bombing target is. Looking in my chart for Lily, zone 4 is -1F. The F this time stands for France. Our fighter escort level is still good. And our zone weather is the next thing we roll on. Even though it's the target zone, even though there are special things that happen, you still go through the whole fighter encounter first. Here is our weather table. This time, if the previous zone weather was 100% cloud, there's a +2 modifier. We go ahead and roll. 2 plus 2 is 4. That comes out as haze again. Now, haze is the kind of the neutral. There are no die roll modifiers anywhere dealing with haze. We don't have to roll for mission recall because we're not at 100% cloud, but we do need to roll for mechanical failure. Comes out as 50. No mechanical failure. All right. The next step is to roll for contrails. Only on a 1 to 3. We get a 6. No contrails. So that's good. We are still in formation, and we are still above 10,000 feet. The next step is to roll for fighter resistance. Now, in this instance, we've got a -1 zone modifier, and we've got a -1 good fighter escort modifier, and that's it. So it's a -2. We roll 8. -2 is 6. If we look on our chart, 6, moderate. We have moderate fighter resistance over the target. I'm going ahead and marking that down. We still need now to roll for the number of fighter waves. We're over the target. Actually, and here I'm going to show you the chart again because there is another modifier, and it's only the second time we've seen the chart anyway. So moderate is +1, low is +1, but then there's this other one. If currently in designated target zone, which we are, that's another +1. So we're at +3 for this modifier. 5 plus 3 is 8. We look at our chart, 8 to 9. There are 2 waves of fighters that we have to get through before we can fire our bombs at the target. So the next step, as we talked about earlier, is to determine the German fighter appearance, how many fighters are going to appear. And we're going to look under the moderate resistance this time instead of the heavy resistance. And then we'll do this twice. We'll actually go through the whole process of dealing with one wave of fighters up to and including extra attack rounds if they earn them. Then we'll come back to this chart right here and we'll do it all over again for the second wave of fighters. So we go ahead and roll. We roll a 32 and moderate. That's 1 FW190. That's all it is on this chart. And that FW190 on this chart is listed as coming in from 6 o'clock low. Now, coming in from behind like this has its bonuses and its bad things. The good thing for us as the bomber crew from this pilot coming in from 6 o'clock is that the rate of closure for a bomber flying this way and an airplane flying this way is much less than if that fighter is coming this way and the bomber's going this way. As a result, our gunners have much more time to fire on that approaching plane. And it's reflected in the dice roll modifiers. There's a +2 modifier for attacking a fighter at 6 o'clock. Also, though, if a fighter does get a chance to get a hit on us, it's easier to hit the plane, and it does more damage if it does hit the plane. So, it's kind of a mixed blessing. So we've got one fighter in this first wave. He's coming in from 6 o'clock. We do roll for our fighter cover presence, and this may be our saving grace on this specific attack. We've got good fighter cover, even over the target zone because it's close enough. We roll. It rolls a 7. If we look on our chart, 2, 1. Now remember what we said. That first number is how many fighters the first wave gets driven off, and that second number is second and third wave. While that number is 2 for the first wave, there's only one fighter. Guess what? That fighter's gone. Our little friend said to take a hike, so he's gone. Now, if we had any surviving fighters like we did the first time, we'd go ahead and determine the combat for that fighter. But we don't. So, at this point, that wave is complete. So we need to go back and redo the whole wave, starting with the fighter appearance chart for the second wave of fighters. 11. Let's take a look at 11. 1s and 6s are interesting. 1-1 under moderate resistance, none. No fighters in that second wave. Maybe they saw us coming in, they said, hey, that's the BGG, we don't want any part of that. So, no fighters, none. Normally, in a zone, that'd be it. We'd be done. But because we're in the target zone, and again, you can see our bomber here is listed in the target zone. In the book, it tells us zone 4 is the target zone. We're not done in this zone. We actually now, at this point, go through the bombing process. And the bombing process is a little bit later in the table book, and we start it on table 6.0, which are the target zone tables. First things first, we need to determine target visibility. Yes, it could be cloudy or clear or hazy, but that doesn't necessarily give you the visibility. The visibility is modified by the weather, but it doesn't control whether it's visible or not. It is just a one regular die. In this case, because we're on haze, we have no modifier, so it's just a straight up roll. We get a 3. Target is slightly obscured. No special modifiers to the other tables. Okay? So that's kind of like haze, slightly obscured, and I'm just writing that on my zone worksheet. Slightly obscured is the neutral position. Once you've determined target visibility, you then have to deal with flak, German gunners from the ground shooting up at you. If you take a look at the modifiers for the flak, it basically deals with, more than anything else, whether the target was completely or mostly obscured. If you're performing evasive action is a defensive measure a bomber can use if they are no longer in formation, if there are contrails, or if we're at 10,000 feet and an engine is out, or even if things are clear. Clear means you can see the target better, but it means the targets can see you better. In our case, we don't have any modifiers, so it's simply a regular die roll. 4. Light flak is what we come up with for 4, and I'll mark that on my worksheet. There's a spot for flak level, so it's light. And that brings us to the next table, which is flak hits to the bomber. You have to roll on this table 3 times. And you have light, medium, or heavy flak.